Welcome and thanks for attending this talk. This is some lessons that I've learned about leadership through a couple years' work at technical or Olympic weightlifting. So I'm Jim Holmes, and I am the Director of QA and Performance at Construct Connect. Except that isn't me. This is me. I'm 58 years old, I'm balding, I'm overweight, I'm not all that strong. This is not a talk about me bragging about throwing around a whole lot of weight. I'm not all that strong. Rather, this talk is about some epiphanies that I had through this process of working with a world-class trainer. And it really wasn't so much an epiphany as it was a lot of relearning of things that I'd forgotten over years and years of working with teams, of managing people, of leading and mentoring others. And kind of the meta point of all of this, the thread that runs through this talk, is a reminder that things you learn in one area can apply to other areas of your life and of your job. So the first thing that really hit me as I was going through this process of working with a really great trainer was the importance of making complex things simple. In Olympic-style lifting, one of the most complex lifts is the snatch lift. This is Rebecca Koha at the 2019 European Championship. She's like 17 or 18, and the snatch lift starts with the athlete grabbing the weight on the ground. They lift it up slowly, they begin to accelerate, they drive their hips through, they explode underneath the bar, and then finally extend. So that's smooth. You can tell it was some hard work. She just set a world record there. When you're learning the snatch, you don't just start with the weight on the ground and throw it up over your head. That's a recipe for failure, injury, and a whole lot of pain. Instead, good coaches will break this down into 12 or 15 different specific phases that you have to learn to master the snatch. In this case, they're working with an empty PVC. They're working with a piece of PVC pipe here to get the grip and the hand position correct. After that, this particular coach starts from the top down. So he's actually working on the extension, the position of the elbows, the position of the shoulder blades at the top of the lift. Then the next thing they might work with is exploding underneath the bar, so on and forth. The point is that complex motion gets broken down into tiny little pieces. You learn each one of those, and then you start the bigger process, the bigger exercise. So think about our daily job, particularly as a team lead. You don't have to have all the answers. You've probably got a team of really smart people, and it's your job to help them break complex things down. So think about sizing and estimation, or complex workflows that we have, or really hard domain problems. In my case, we're currently undergoing checking how our desktop applications work under Windows 11. We've got several desktop apps. Windows 11 is out. We need to make sure that they work well. Well, the thing is that there's a huge number of test cases there, and it would take a crazy amount of time to run through all of them on every application. Instead, we're not going to look at all those. And I worked with my team to help them figure out which parts of that overall test suite were the most critical ones. And we decided that we needed to take a look and focus on graphics and the security model under Windows 11. And printing for us is critical. Also things that interact with I/O or date time. And then, oh my God, all the third-party controls that are always difficult when you change operating systems. So we were able to take that huge test suite and instead focus on smaller things that were directly pertinent to Windows 11, a new operating system. Another thing that was a really good reminder was the importance of focusing on simple tools. Rather than diving straight to the biggest, most complex things, striving for simplicity in a solution is a really great idea. So in addition to working out 2 or 3 times a week at the gym with my trainer, I was also training at home. But I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of space. I have a garage full of junk. But you know what I did have? I had a treadmill that I bought for my daughter years ago. I had a broken cinder block that I found in a field nearby. It wasn't even a whole cinder block, it was a broken one. I went out and I bought a sandbag that I filled up with about 70 pounds of sand and I could swing around. I had some really high quality resistance bands. And yes, I even used the broomstick. So if we think about this relating back to software delivery, oftentimes teams and individuals get fixated on the latest, greatest, most fancy tool, whether it's open source or commercial. But the thing is, our clients, our customers may not actually have a need for that. And it's regardless whether we're consultants building something for clients or we're solving problems for people inside our own organization, those customers may not be able to use whatever that latest, greatest tool is. So how do we go about finding them simplicity? So I have a great story that illustrates this. Years ago, I used to help run a conference for software developers, testers, basically delivery teams. One of the sponsors, a vendor there, decided they were going to have a coding challenge. And so people were using Ruby, Smalltalk. Somebody was crazy enough to write something in assembler, I bet. A friend of mine showed up at the conference and he'd forgotten his computer. So he went to the sponsor table and he asked if he could borrow one of the salespeople's laptop there. He fired up Microsoft Word, added a table, thought through a few formulas in the table. He solved the problem and he won the coding challenge using Microsoft Word. When you're looking at the tools that you're going to solve a problem with, first think to simplicity. It makes your life a lot easier. The next light bulb moment that kind of hit was the reminder of the necessity of focusing on form first and then adding weight. When you're working on the snatch drill, for example, you're going to start off with an empty weight bar and you're going to focus on very specific things. This is me at the end of a hard training session, and you'll notice I have an empty 45-pound Olympic bar. In front of me, that pink bar that's there weighs 35 pounds. You might be able to see an aluminum bar right behind that. That thing weighs 25 pounds. And way in the back there is an empty wood dowel that weighs precisely 7.26 pounds. I have no idea how much it weighed. Point being, my trainer, in the space of about 20 or 25 minutes, kicked my butt focusing on the movement with no weight. We had to get the form down, then we could move on to weight after I'd gotten safe and really proficient at this hard, complex movement. So think about when you might need to dive in and work with build up a J-meter performance suite. But if you're new, that's jumping straight to the end, and you're probably not going to do well at that. Instead, we want to focus on, say, exploring a user flow using Chrome or Brave DevTools. Once you understand the basics of that, you might explore those APIs using Postman. And from there, you might be able to use REST Sharp or something else to automate the workflow and better understand how it goes, and then dive into JMeter and be able to run things at load and at scale. But you can't just jump to that. You have to focus on the form first, learn the mechanics, learn the fundamentals, and then move on. Setting goals is a really crucial part of life, both personal life and work life. Some years ago, I decided that I wanted to improve my health and improve my strength so that if somebody was hurt and was in a dangerous situation, I could pull them out and get them to safety. So that meant basically being able to throw a human over my shoulder in a fireman's carry and be able to carry them out. And I wasn't strong enough to do that at the point. So I worked with my trainer and we worked on things like deadlift and squat. And I was able to squat 250 pounds after a bunch of other work. But this was my goal because that's roughly a large human body. And I knew then at that point, if somebody was hurt, I could get them to safety until first responders or, some real smart people could come take care of things. So let's talk about the technology world, there are a daunting number of things to learn and directions to go. And how do you help your people get a goal in mind so that they can advance their own skills and advance their value to them and the organization? So it might start off with just narrowing down broad categories. Are you interested in learning performance testing? What about mobile testing? Do you want to learn JavaScript so that you can work in that domain? Once they've picked that out, helping them establish a roadmap and milestones or goals. But there's one thing about being a leader that's kind of a moral imperative. Please make sure your team members don't get focused in or lose their time on SharePoint. So the next thing is, how are you going to help your team when things fail, right? It's not if things fail, it's when things fail. And the critical piece here was learning to adapt and how that translates to making sure your team feels safe and able to adapt. So I mentioned that I had hit my goal of 250 pounds. I was enjoying my lifting. It was great. I had a couple next steps in mind for goals. But then I tore my meniscus in my left knee. And that is, unfortunately, given my age and the type of injury, it was a career-ending problem. So I'm done with Olympic technical weightlifting. But the thing is, I wanted to stay as fit as possible. Particularly as I'm getting older, I want to stay functional and I want to stay in good shape. So I adapted and I changed. I started working out with kettlebells at home, and I do transverse plane of motion things with a sledgehammer, and I'm doing bent over rows that don't involve my knees. And I was having some really great progress there. But then it turned out that I blew out my right knee. So I tore the meniscus there, and I had some other very significant cartilage injuries that mandated yet another change. So this was pretty disheartening, but after some time, I figured out, well, you know what? I can do upper body workouts. And so now I spend a lot of time doing hypertrophy exercises where it's lighter weight, but slow, long motions, a lot of reps. I can also do things like pull-ups. But again, because I'm old and I'm not all that strong, I have to use a cheater strap, which helps me get through the motions. The thing is, stuff happens. And you as a leader have to figure out how to make sure that your team feels safe when failure happens so that they can learn and adapt. And there's a great example of this with Netflix. Netflix generates over a petabyte of log data every day. A petabyte every day. And logging is a central service to all of the various Netflix internal applications and customers because this is how they analyze what their customers are using. So back in 2015, Netflix had made this entire new service for handling logs, and they flipped it to go live, and blink, the lights went out, metaphorically. There was a company-wide outage, and it wasn't just internal. All of Netflix's customer applications went down, so no users could use Netflix. In addition, there was some significant data loss. Whoops. But the thing is, Netflix's leadership had set up an environment that was safe for that failure. Nobody was fired, nobody was punished. Instead, they stepped back, they learned, and they adapted. They came up with a successful new architecture, and moreover, they decided that they needed to do weekly disaster recovery tests to learn and adapt. And by the way, they did that in production. The leaders had set a great culture. So what's the overall lesson for this talk? As a leader, as a person, as a human, learning happens everywhere. But particularly for your teams, for the humans that you manage or that you oversee or that you mentor, find those little bits of gold and figure out how to apply them in your daily life with your team. Thank you for your time.